Welcome on this bright, sunny Canberra morning. For those of you who got here last night, you should have experienced frost. I hear the rest of you don't normally see frost, but we're getting towards the end of it this year. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge and celebrate the first Australians on whose traditional lands we meet, and pay our respects to the elders of the Ngunnawal people, past and present. So, in Australian style, we need to have a few details. The rest of the world, as I found out, finds these very amusing, but we take them very seriously. If an alarm were to sound, we need to evacuate this hall out through the green exit sign, take a right and another right, come out, and assemble away from whatever's on fire or is causing us problems out into the courtyard. Should also say tomorrow morning we will be having a group photo at morning tea. And in the spirit of us wanting to mix things up a little bit, we would like you, between every session, that is between every morning tea, lunch break, to change seats in a way which is uncorrelated with your neighbors. Minister, that's a strong That way you got to meet and talk to new people. We also have a guest here. Ruth, could you stand up? Now, if everyone looks at Ruth, you will know she looks amazingly like another member of the audience, our first speaker. Ruth Madison, mom of Sarah, is photographing the event for the Women in Astronomy and ASA. If you do not want to be photographed, you should let her know. She is also undertaking a documentary program, which there is a flyer. You should all receive a flyer that describes it. If you would like to participate in that, please come and see her, and she would love to have your involvement. Also, I'd like to note that we're able to do this event through generous sponsorship, so it doesn't cost anything. Monash University is a sponsor, and we have several major sponsors this year that have allowed us to provide travel support and to venue and all of the other bits. And these include the Australian Astronomical Observatory, University of New South Wales, the ARC Centre of Excellence Castro, University of Melbourne, the Western Australia ICRA organization, and of course, here at ANU, RSAA, Research School of Astronomy and Astrophysics, and the ANU Gender Institute are the major sponsors. And so I hope that as we go through, each will be sponsoring different events, and you will think about the fact that they have gone through and put real cash on the table so we can have this event. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Senator the Honourable Michaela Cash from Western Australia, who is the several things, but for today, I believe she is the Minister assisting the Prime Minister for Women. And we appreciate her coming out. Today is a sitting day, hence why if you fail to get a hotel room, you're probably paying $550 a night. But it also means that the Minister has bells that start ringing in a fairly short amount of time. So we really appreciate the fact you've been able to come and join us this morning to open up our events. And so this is the annual event where astronomy acknowledges the shortcomings we have in our field of gender diversity and diversity in general. And we're here to do a number of things. We're here to empower astronomers to face and surmount the challenges of our field, but we also want to take a deep look at what we are doing wrong and right so that we can embark on self-improvement. And in the process, join our fellow colleagues, especially in STEM, where things are particularly problematic. And we have a number of people from other disciplines joining us here to help us on this journey, and hopefully we're helping them on theirs. We're doing this to ensure that our vibrant field, astronomy is one of Australia's most highly performing fields on the international stage. We want to remain so. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is if we take full advantage of the full range across a town, and indeed the world. So, on behalf of the conference organizers and the Astronomers of Australia, I would like to thank you for addressing us this morning, and I'll invite you up to the stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor, and ladies and gentlemen, it is just absolutely fabulous to be here this morning. Just to put my day into context and to say why I truly am appreciative of the role that I have here today, I started my morning by launching a report by Plan Australia in conjunction with Plan International, and it's their report on child and forced marriage internationally. And so I've come away from a function this morning whereby I was talking about the fact that 40,000 girls under the age of 18 every day, I'll just say that again, 40,000 girls under the age of 18 every single day are forced into marriage globally. So it is wonderful to now come to a function where we are amongst those who are truly taking a stand in relation to gender equality. And I acknowledge each and every one of you for that. But in particular, to you, Professor, and the conversation that we had this morning and your acknowledgement of the work that has to be done in relation to the field of astronomy. The Professor made a comment to me, Michaelia, we have approximately 75% of people in this particular field are men, which means that at least 75% of the solution should be coming from men. And I think that resonates so well in particular with the fact that you will be listening to Elizabeth Broderick over the course of this workshop, and she'll be talking to you about the fabulous work that the male champions of change are doing in the gender equality space. So to you, Professor, and to all the blokes who are here today, thank you for your commitment to gender equality, because women's issues are men's issues, because at the end of the day they're just people's issues, and we're all going to solve those issues together. Can I also just tell you very briefly of two facts that I have learned since I have been here this morning? The first is, and I hope this sends a really, really exciting message to all of the women here, but in particular the women who are 40 and under, that I understand that 2 weeks ago, the first woman to receive a field medal under the age of 40 was actually from Iran, but obviously within your area. That is so exciting and something that you should all be very proud of, and hopefully it's something that someone in this room is aspiring for. The other quick fact that I learned this morning, which has really piqued my interest in astronomy, is I was saying I was back in Perth on Friday night, and I just happened to mention that I was privileged enough to see Queen. Now, because you are astronomers or in the field, you know where this conversation's going, because obviously I just wouldn't say that I had a great time in Perth on Friday night and I happened to go to a rock concert. Brian May, I personally didn't really know about Brian May's interest in astronomy, and he took 10 to 15 minutes out to actually play for the audience the songs that he had written about astronomy, about space travel, and whilst he was playing them, the most amazing, amazing presentations were being put up on the screen, flying through space, etc. And then he gave a spiel about astronomy and his love of it, etc. And then I Googled him, and I came away and I was like, wow, that is just so fascinating. And when I shared that with the professor this morning, he said to me, and Michaelia, did you know that there was a connection to Australia with Dr. Brian May? And I didn't know that. But whilst he was undertaking his PhD, he actually came out and, now what was the word that you used? It was on the telescope. He observed on the telescope. It was the Anglo-Australian telescope in northern New South Wales. How exciting is that? And just that small thing for me has just absolutely piqued in me a further interest in astronomy. So I just wanted to share that with you, because I was very excited that I was then going to be coming here today and actually, you know, meeting with a whole lot of people who are interested in this field. But can I say, it is just so fantastic to be here today with so many people in relation to this field who share the government's commitment to gender equality, who want to see women be able to make the choices that they want to make, as opposed to the choices that they have to make, because society still has structural and cultural barriers that are in place that we need to break down. It heartened me when I walked in today, and I'm about to embarrass this poor mother who is currently feeding her child, and I've made the assumption she's your child, so I apologise, but it's wonderful when you walk into a room, you're talking about gender equality, you're talking about structural, institutional, cultural barriers that need to be broken down, and there is a small child being fed. That says to me already that you guys are in the right space. So congratulations. That certainly has heartened me walking in this morning. Can I also just say to the Australian Women in Astronomy chapter of the Astronomical Society of Australia, you have done absolutely outstanding work in raising the profile of women in astronomy, and these workshops, I think, are a great way to highlight what you do, but in particular to showcase the work you're doing to break down those cultural, structural and institutional barriers. The wonderful thing, in particular about astronomers, but about scientists more generally, is that you of all people understand that there is always more to learn. Not everybody who chooses to study at university actually understands that. They think that when they've finished their degree or their course of learning, that's it. I've peaked. You always know there is something else. There's always another question to be answered. And can I say that is very similar in relation to where we are now as a society and our journey on gender equality. We understand that there is evidence. We understand that there is a body of evidence that needs to be looked at, it needs to be considered, and then we need to implement appropriate responses. We also understand that that body of evidence will continue to build, and that we need to continually, in this space, be reinventing ourselves. Because whilst the statistics are what they are, and they are not good, please take heart within reason that whilst you are here today to talk about gender equality, unfortunately, you are not the only body who meets like this. Across society, we know we have to do more in relation to gender equality. When you have a population in the world that is approximately 51% female, and then you look at the statistics of women in, for example, STEM, of women in leadership, we know that there is a lot more to be done. I have to say, I've just got a few anecdotes to share with you in relation to the field of astronomy and what I've learned about your progression to where you are today. As we all know, it was once believed with conviction that our world was flat. It was also once believed that the universe was geocentric and all celestial bodies orbited our Earth. Interestingly, in your field, it was also once believed that a woman could be too pretty for a job in science. I can back that up with an actual real-life example. Marion White, the third woman science graduate from the University of Sydney, had her application for a job as a junior demonstrator rejected by the university in 1897 for this very reason. Just as, however, we now accept that the world is not flat, it is indeed round. In the future, I would hope that, and I hope there's no one in this room who believes this, but the idea that a woman's place is in the home, or that a woman is too pretty to undertake a particular role, will well and truly be things that we can just stand here and quietly tell a small anecdote about, as opposed to being realities that women face in life. Of course, we have, if you look at where we were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we have come a long way. We have. However, as we know, there is still a long way to go. In terms of what the government can do to ensure that the issue of gender equality is resolved, we can have a look at what the structural and institutional barriers are that are still in place. There are two that I want to touch on today. The first in particular is in relation to childcare. In 2010, I had the honour of being appointed the Shallow Parliamentary Secretary for Women, and it was then that I commenced my journey around Australia, talking to stakeholder after stakeholder after stakeholder, whether they be male or whether they be female. And I put to them one very simple question. If the government could do one thing for you by way of a policy change, that it would enable either you or your partner to participate in the workplace in the manner in which you want to, that suits your family, that suits your lifestyle, what would it be? And I can tell you that almost without fail, the answer to that question was, Michaelia, you need to do something about the childcare system in Australia. The childcare system in Australia is one that really is an institutional one. It functions still on the fact that Australians allegedly work from 9 to 5. I don't know about you, but even in the time that I've been on this earth, I've never worked a 9 to 5 work day. I, though, don't have children, so I've never had to struggle with going to work but knowing where I was going to put my children before I went to work. So in terms of what this government's done, many of you will be aware that we heard the call and we instructed the Productivity Commission to commence the review into childcare. Very key terms of reference, the three things being childcare in Australia needs to be more affordable. I'm genuinely horrified at what people pay to have their children looked after on a daily basis. Childcare needs to be more flexible because, as I said, I don't know about you, but 9 to 5 does not cut it in the real world, and childcare needs to be more accessible. The Productivity Commission received in excess of 400 submissions and over 700 comments. By Productivity Commission review standards, that is a resounding success. And what it says to me as a member of the government is that Australians were genuinely engaged in this review. The Productivity Commission have handed their draft report to government with certain recommendations, a number of them you would have already read about in the press. We have in turn handed that to stakeholders. And we've said we want your comments on it. Because later on this year, when this government makes its changes and makes its announcement in relation to the childcare system, we want to ensure that we've brought Australians along for this journey. We want to ensure that the childcare changes that we announce are reflective of the feedback that we receive from the mums and the dads and the families in society that are directly affected by the current cultural, structural and institutional barriers within childcare. I have to say, even though I don't have children, I am very excited about the announcements that we will be making later on this year, because I believe they are a genuine step in the right direction if we really do want to normalise parental responsibility in the workplace. The other key scheme for us, and you will have all read a lot about, is obviously our paid parental leave scheme. I am fundamentally in favour of a paid parental leave scheme, and in particular the difference between our paid parental leave scheme and the current scheme is that our scheme includes superannuation. You all know the statistics in relation to superannuation, but I will remind you because they're so stark. Women retire with 30% less superannuation than men, and there are currently 40% of women who are retired who have nothing. We really don't want women going forward to be part of those statistics. So having superannuation as part of a paid parental leave scheme is very, very important. Just in relation to the government's commitment to the STEM fields, I absolutely want to see, in particular, more young women, young females, young girls, but even women who want a career course, looking to STEM as to the career they want to pursue. A few months ago I stood in this exact place and I had the opportunity to launch a book with a number of young women here, Tech Girls Are Superheroes. And again, it was all about encouraging girls to go into the STEM fields. What we've done as a government, I would like to share with you, that signifies our commitment to this important area, is that we have made an election commitment to restore the focus on STEM subjects, because we do believe it is critical that they are not left behind. How are we doing this? We have established a STEM Ministerial Advisory Board to ensure these subjects get even more attention when teachers are trained, and we're maintaining funding for the primary connections linking science with literacy and science by doing education programs. We're also directly working with the state governments, because at the end of the day it's the state governments or the territory governments that run education, but we are working directly with them to ensure that they give the STEM subjects more focus in their curriculums, with a view to increasing the extent to which they become compulsory in secondary years. The Department of Industry has also formed a cross-departmental STEM action plan working group, and the Chief Scientist has established a National Committee on Women in STEM. So you really are part of a very, very exciting time in relation to the STEM fields. The issue we also have is this. It's one thing for a government to say we want to encourage more women in particular to go into STEM, we want more focus on the STEM fields, and this is what we're doing. The issue you face, which is what the professor has outlined this morning, is you actually need to then retain the women that you have. And that is something that we all do need to work on. One of the issues that women face, and I believe we were talking about it during your forum today, is unconscious bias. It's a genuine issue, not just in STEM, not just in the field of astronomy. It is a genuine issue that we as women face across all sectors of society. But I want to give you an example of unconscious bias within your particular field. In 2012, Yale University released a study demonstrating that physicists, chemists and biologists viewed young male scientists more favourably than young female scientists with the exact same qualification. Presented with 6 identical resumes of 2 imaginary applicants, professors at 6 male research institutions were significantly more likely to offer the male a job. If they did hire a woman, her salary on average was $4,000 lower than her male counterparts. Unfortunately, it didn't stop there. I'm sure you're all thinking, but hold on, what would it have been like if there were women on that particular selection panel? Not great news, unfortunately. The research actually also found that female scientists preferred male applicants over female applicants. So in terms of that research, as I said, I can give you a specific example, a real life example for you, but it's not limited to STEM, it's not limited to science, etc. It's across the board. It is an issue that we need to tackle, and I really do hope you spend some time during this workshop looking at how you believe you can remove unconscious bias, in particular from your selection processes. Just very quickly though, the other thing that I'm a big believer in is sponsorship or championing, as I like to call it. Mentoring is absolutely fantastic. I will never underestimate the benefits of mentoring. But in terms of the technical term sponsorship, I prefer to use the term champion. Absolutely, the research has shown that both men and women who have actual champions in their workplace, people who go out and make that call, have you considered, you know, Mary Smith? Have you considered this person? Are more likely to get the job that they have applied for than those in particular women who do not have a champion. So again, over the course of your workshop, I really do hope that you give some time to looking at how you believe each one of you here could become a champion for the next woman who's looking for an opportunity to promote herself within this field. And can I say to the women here, believe me, you don't need another woman as a champion. Reach out to the blokes in this room. Blokes, it would be great if you could put your hands up and become a champion for one of these women here. And the mere fact that you're here today signals to me that you are very, very likely to. You have some fantastic role models, women in astronomy, that you can all look to. Can I just say, today's female astronomers benefit from the achievements and breakthroughs. In particular, you'd be all aware of this lady, Ruby Payne-Scott. She kept her marriage a secret in the 1940s and 50s, so she could keep working as an astronomer for the CSIRO despite the public service marriage bar in place at that time. A little bit of a worry when you've got to say that happened in the 1940s or 50s. My understanding is, and you would all know this, that Ruby Payne-Scott was by all accounts an exceptional astronomer who assisted in the invention of radar technology and made major contributions to the techniques of radio astronomy. She clearly was also a fantastic advocate for the rights of females in the workplace. And the good news for CSIRO, and I understand we have some people from CSIRO here today, is that they have remembered her through the CSIRO Payne-Scott Award, which assists researchers who have taken career breaks to care for family to re-enter their field. That is a fantastic way to recognise a trailblazer, in particular in your fields. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to address you today. As I said, I was very excited to come and meet a group of people whom I personally, astronomy is not something that I'm in touch with on a daily basis. It's wonderful that you have these workshops. I'm a big believer that these types of workshops really do make headway in breaking down those cultural, structural and institutional barriers that we still unfortunately do face as women in society. But just looking at the people here today and knowing the speakers that you are going to be hearing from, I think it's going to be a fantastic event, and I certainly wish you all the very best. Thank you.
Senator, thank you so much. The enthusiasm you bring to this portfolio is unlike anything I've seen since being in Australia, so it's great to see that. I should also mention that they're going to have to be, Marty Hughes-Warrington, representing the AAU, had an unexpected visit to the dentist this morning. So she was going to lead things off, and so I forgot to introduce her when we started. But thank you so much for coming by and showing support, Marty, in this and other activities at the university. And Senator, good luck making your first bell at Parliament House. Thank you so much. Let's give the Senator another one. All right, so we're going to lead off the program, and our first speaker is Dr. Sarah Madison, Professor Sarah Madison, I apologize, and she's going to be talking about the demographics of diversity in Australian astronomy. And I would just warn viewers of this that you may be distressed by what you're about to hear and see.
Great, I've got all the bad news, that's lovely. Thank you very much, thanks. Yep, so I'm going to talk about demographics. Yep, and I am not really going to talk about diversity, I'm sorry, because I've really only got two sorts in most of my talk, which is men and women, so I don't know how diverse you call that. So it's really going to be about percentages of men and women in various areas, and I've given this talk a few times, but I was told that's okay to do, and I'll come back to that in a moment. This sort of collection of demographics data comes from the Women in Astronomy chapter of the ASA, whose primary goals are basically to monitor the status of women in astronomy via the collection of statistics, and then with that information to make recommendations for future actions that will improve the situation, certainly for women, but then that means for all astronomers. And to assist to ensure that there's appropriate representation of women at all levels, and organise meetings, including meetings like this. And my little star there is to remind me, in terms of representation of women, I've now got on the other computer a community announcement here that the AAL board is going to be putting out a call very soon for positions on AAL. And in 2011, you can see their statistics of the number of women on the various boards and committees was at about 15%, which they said was lower than the Australian national average, and they wanted to increase that. And so they have done so. They're now at around 25%, and they'd really like to just encourage more women to apply for those positions when the call goes out. And then the question is, why do we need these demographics? So it's often reported, and we've already sort of heard a bit about this, that the positions for women in astronomy are not increasing at the same rate that qualified women PhD graduates are, and that therefore women, and also that women are not represented at the highest levels. And so we really want the statistics to support these claims. And as I was putting these talk together, and basically all I do each year is copy what I had for last year and update a few slides, I said to my colleague Emma Weber at Swinburne, I think people are getting bored of Sarah coming up every year and basically giving exactly the same talk. And she said, Sarah, no, this is really important. We're scientists. Before we can have a discussion, we need to see the data. So, okay, here's the data now. Thank you, Emma, for telling me that. So I got some slides about what I thought was quite interesting is that certainly over sort of the last almost 30 years, the number of women that are graduating from universities is now greater than the number of men graduating from universities. And yet men have 9 times better chance of becoming some sort of senior role. And here I've got some sort of stats on the ASX and sort of, companies and things, which in a way doesn't relate to us. But you can see that once you get to the highest level you know, there's really not very many women up there. And Gunilla Burrows sent me some data, which was very nice. And I think if you look at the Canadian statistics in 2006, 60% of women graduating from 60% of graduates from university were women. 2011 in the UK, 55% of university graduates were women. 2013 in the US, 57% of graduates were women. And in Australia in 2012, 60% of graduates from university were women. So the graduates from university are clearly women. But what happens then is that we know men certainly are outnumbering women in STEM subjects. Within Australia, that's about 30% of STEM graduates are women. And we know that these numbers sort of keep going. So this was a little info thingy, whatever they're called. Young people will know what they're called. But it really shows the split of where this sort of gap of women in science arrives. And the numbers I just gave you are, this is just in general. This is not specific to, is that right? No, sorry, let me just read what I've got here. That's why I've got my notes. So this is a report was released in March 2014 by the L'Oreal Foundation, and it was having a look at the underrepresentation of women in science. And they got data from 14 different countries, which was collected by the Boston Consulting Group. And this is what it shows across 14 countries overall. And you can see that when it gets to the end of high school, you've basically got 50% women and 50% men that are interested in science. And then as you progress through the field, through university, through jobs, and finally Nobel Prizes, you can see that, you know, the number for the men's track here continues to rise and the women's track continues to go down. So, you know, what are we going to do about that? And so within the chapter, you know, we've got a bunch of statistics that we're collecting from the ASA, because it's a chapter of the ASA. And these are really things about trying to have a look at the rate of progression of women through academic ranks, also their retention rate, to have a look at the recognition of women, and looking at sort of prestige factors. And these are the sorts of things that help you with your promotion. So they're really sort of quite important. How do we collect the data? We ask people to give it to us, and certainly through this decadal planning process, and also things like memberships from societies, government reporting, etc. The hardest thing to do, as I can certainly attest to, is going through surveys and getting survey data and asking the right question and asking the right question every year. And so some numbers that I want to present to you, there'll be some numbers from the National Committee of Astronomy, who does these decadal planning surveys. I'll give you a very sneak preview of some of the sort of high-level data there. Within the ASA, Astronomical Society of Australia, also some updated data from the Australian Research Council, so that's about the grants and who gets the grants, and then a few other things within Australia as well as internationally. So if we have a look at the Australian data, so over a decadal time period from the mid-1990s up until the mid-2000s, there was an increase in women. So in terms of academic jobs, we went from sort of 15% to around 20% women in Australian astronomy, and the graduate student numbers went from sort of 20% to 40% over that 10-year time period. But in the last 10 years, it's actually been quite flat. So we did a mid-term, very short snapshot survey in 2010, and then we've just done the mega survey now in 2014. And what we can see there is that for women in academic positions, that number has not changed. And what you can see in the data here is that for PhD, for grad students, that number's gone down. But my little arrow, my little stars there are to remind me that, unfortunately, whenever we do these things, we sort of ask slightly different questions. So what I can tell you here is that these numbers, in terms of women in academic jobs, that encompassed kind of all women in astronomy, whereas this recent number is women researchers. So it's women in the research positions, which means not as many people working within the support roles at the national facilities. However, my guess is that most of the people in those support roles at the national facilities are dominated by men anyway. Warwick shaking his head, so I need to see those numbers, but we didn't bloody ask them. So I'll be coming back to the 3 national facilities, well 2 plus ANU, who also have instrument builders, and asking them, but that number's a bit sort of skewed. This number here, in terms of the grad students, this is rather than how many of your current grad students are women, which is what we'd asked in the past. This number is the number within the last 5 years of PhD graduates. So how many PhDs have we graduated in the past 5 years in Australia? Of those, about 30% are women. So we need to kind of see how these numbers are calculated, and I'll do more analysis of that and get back to everybody. What else did I want to say? That'll probably do for that one. If we have a look now at the ASA, oh, actually, no, sorry, there was a very important point that I've missed there, which is actually super, super important, which is the increase in the number of positions within astronomy. It's been sort of 30% increase in the total number of positions in astronomy in the last decade, which is fantastic. So there's jobs, so that's great. However, the increase in contract positions has been pretty huge, and so we've kind of gone in these last couple of decades from sort of 35-ish% to 48%, and now we're up to 65% of astronomy positions are contract positions. And so what effect that has on people, I'm not supposed to be making comments, I'm supposed to just present the data, but you know, there's certainly suggestions that having a lack of certainty, which affects everybody, men and women, absolutely, but there does seem to be a lot of data out there from, in general, in STEM fields, that this is one of the primary reasons why women leave STEM, because they don't have a permanent job and they want to go somewhere where they can get more permanency. And the same is certainly true of men as well, but there's more of them. So this is some of the ASA statistics, and this is about the membership data, and you can see this tracking through time. From 1999 through to 2013. We collect this data every 2 years, so we'll update these numbers next year. This little asterisk here for the honorary members, that's got asterisks because the number's so low, but the people who are in these honorary positions are usually members who are extremely active within the society and often were previous presidents. And so the reason that statistic's low goes back to the statistics on the ASA presidents. So we have had 3 women out of 24 since 1966, so 13% of the presidents of the ASA have been women, and similarly with sort of the vice presidents. And I think that's all I wanted to say there. The other thing is about prizes, and prizes are important because it's a measure of esteem and it's something that goes on your CV, and the more of these things you have, then the more likely you are to get promoted, or these things set you apart from other people, so it really is very important. So here I've got a list of the ASA's prizes, the years that this data covers, and the percentage of women that have been awarded these prizes, and then the last column is sort of who they're for. So the Bock Prize is for the honours students, so this should be, you know, telling us something about the undergraduate level. Admittedly, we don't have heaps of honours students in Australia, but we've got sort of 33% women winning the prize, which sounds about right for what the demographic should be. The Charlene Heisler Prize is relatively new. It's been going for just under 10 years. That's for the best PhD awarded in Australia, 22%, and that's sort of half the percentage of PhD women graduates we have. The Louise Webster Prize is for postdocs. That's very new, so the statistics are kind of a bit lumpy there. And that number went down because of a man won this year. So that number kind of dropped quite dramatically, but the number was sort of stupidly high before because there weren't very many. The David Allen Prize and the Robert Ely Lecture, those are very low, but which way does it go? One is only awarded, there's only been 4 awarded, and the other one is only awarded every few years. The other thing that we collect statistics on is the student prizes at the ASA annual scientific meeting, so the poster prizes and the best student talk. And you can see that those numbers are really high. And in fact, if you take, because we're also nice in astronomy, and so we don't just have one winner, we have lots of secondary winners, which is lovely. So there's actually lots of people. And if you just take the first prize, in both of those categories over these past 5 years, it's been 4 out of 5 have been women winners for both the poster and the talk, which is pretty amazing. So we just need to get all of our sort of fabulous science and ability to communicate with science moving up into here. So what does that say? And I wonder, again, I'm not really saying anything, but you know, might there be some unconscious biases in when we give the big prizes? I'm not allowed to say. Right, moving along. So within the Astronomical Society meetings, this is the same data that I showed last year, but what we did is a few years ago within the chapter, we said, okay, what we want to do is start monitoring how we're travelling with our ASA meetings, who is on the SOC, the Scientific Organising Committee, who's on the local organising committee, who is an invited speaker. Again, this is a measure of prestige. It's something that you can put on your CV and it says, I've been invited to 10 million conferences, so obviously everybody loves me. And you really want those numbers to be increasing for women. And what I try to say when I start to collect some of these statistics is if you just ask people, I'm going to collect some statistics, then you're just trying to make them aware that maybe there's a problem. So you're not telling them to change their behaviour, you're just saying, do whatever you want to do and I'm going to ask you for the statistics at the end. And you hope that that alone will kickstart people thinking. And I recall very well for the UNSW meeting, they were so excited that they had 50% of women on their SOC. And they were also very excited that they had a good number of invited speakers. And then they were blown out of the water by Monash the next year. So it was like a competition. And I wasn't at the quarry this year, and I haven't got their data yet, but I'm hoping that their data continues to expand in this correct direction. What about the ARC? This is a little bit of older data here from a 2010 ARC Discovery Project consultation paper. And what you can see on the top graph there, the bars are the gender, split by gender of the career age of the participants, so people that are submitting an application for a DP. And what you can see here basically is that there's lots of younger women and there's not very many older women. With men it's the same general trend, but with women it really stands out in the red there. And then the graphs up here are the success rate. And so by the time you get up to the sort of later career age, which is when you should be quite mature and everybody knows about you and your research should be great anyway, the difference in the success rate gets smaller and smaller. But at the younger or the more junior parts of their career, women are still less successful than men at getting ARC grants. So think about that when the next round comes and you've got women at your institutes putting in applications, be a champion for them. Down the bottom here was a graph of the ECR success rates. And if we move along to some more general stats. So I made this graph on the bottom by trying to cobble together data. So what they do is they put together the success rates, the success rates of different sort of, again, they're as bad as us and they count different things each year. So it's really hard to sort of track the same statistics. But what you've got here is the percentage of participants and then the number of participants of these various things, and then the percentage of women participants, and then the success rate of women. And then here's a sort of bar chart, a graph across time of the success rate of men and women. And so it's sad to see that it goes down in general for everyone because ARC's success rate's low. But you can see there was a little time in 2011 we were very cheerful that the number, the success rate for men and women was the same, but unfortunately that's diverged again. And there was no data for 2012. If we go a bit more globally and we have a look at what was FAST, which is Federation of Australian Science and Technology Logical Societies, which is now Science and Technology Australia. This graph is showing, again, is the old leaky pipeline, and so it's showing as you move through career stages, so from bachelor's degree to honours degree to post PhDs, and then level A, B, C and above. And you can see that lots of women here in the lower years, a little bit of a crossover here, and then the women are sinking away and the men are racing up. So great. And if we do the same thing for poor old CSIRO, there was a lovely report in 2009 showing basically the same thing, that they've got lots of women on staff here in the sort of crappy lower level, low paid jobs, that sort of stuff. And when you move up to the higher levels of both pay, management and those sorts of things, the women are dropping off and the men are increasing. And just, I've got another one, but that's the same sort of plot. And just this week, Sydney Morning Herald, the headline of the article was Equity, a distant prospect for women at CSIRO. Nice one. And it showed that CSIRO has 40% women overall, 24% of their research scientists are women, 12% of their technical service roles are taken up by women, 11% of research management is women, while 76% of admin is women. So, nothing's changing there, I'm afraid. If we now go quickly to a couple of other countries around the world to see what's happening in astronomy. So here's the USA. Here is their stats over time of students getting bachelor's degrees in astronomy. And you can see that there was an increase overall, but also certainly an increase in women here in the yellow. There's a big jump there, but it's been pretty flat for the past 10 years. If you have a look at PhDs, a similar sort of thing, and it's kind of a bit rocky and lumpy, not quite sure what's going on there, but it's increased, but now there's been a drop for this last few years, so I don't know how those trends will continue, but they've got about 32% of women getting PhDs in 2012, and that's the same graph, but in percentages, so you can see that same sort of thing. Then if we move on to faculties, so there's also a study done by the American Institute of Physics in 2010, and it was having a look at the number of women in physics faculties, which is continuing to rise, so that's great. And the women at different academic ranks was also increasing. But of course, as you go to the higher positions and move up to full professor, the percentage of women in those roles, is low. And if we look then sort of at new jobs, and so then we're having a look at, when a new position is created, what's the percentage of men versus women into those, and women in newly hired positions is continuing to rise, which is great, but again, you've got the same sort of statistics, so they're all kind of showing the same thing. Prizes within the American Astronomical Society, they've got this chart which I saw from the the AAS in 2008, and I've just kind of split it up down the bottom here so that it shows. So again, prizes, it's all about esteem. So before 1990, 93% of those prizes went to men, 7% went to women. And after 1991, when they tried to sort of change things and track things, pretty much nothing's changed. There's a couple of percent shift. And again, when you then have a look, this is quite an old number and I couldn't quickly find something more new, but this is the number of AAS members. So this number again is, under half of what the representation is of their membership, which is pretty bad. So another statistic on prizes, the prizes bit actually seems to be, I think prizes are really important because this is where a lot of unconscious bias seems to be sneaking into the data. This was another one from the US and it showed within the sciences that women have a very good chance of success in getting awards for service. And when it comes to scholarly awards, their chance of success is far lower. And these are the same women in the same fields. So we like to say women doing great on service, but when it comes to what their actual hardcore science is, we don't recognise them in the same way. There's also similar sorts of data from the UK looking at women in physics at both undergraduate levels, PhDs, and then rising through the ranks as you go down. This is percentage, this is time that you go down as professors. So, the same sorts of numbers, again, pretty low. And if we move to Europe, this is within astronomy. And you can see sort of positions for CNRS is sort of the major science organisation, research science organisation in France, 26% women. Medal winners, pretty disgusting. So again, prizes, no, women don't get prizes. French Academy of Science, I meant to look up the Australian Academy of Science. Does anyone know what the percentage is for the Australian Academy of Science?
Too low.
Too low, something like 10% as well, yeah. Someone can Google it and let us know. 8. Excellent, well done Australia. And European Southern Observatory, sort of numbers of women staff and women in the top level. And, I really should just finish because it kind of gets a bit depressing, doesn't it? Sometimes when we have a look at Latin America, we get really excited. I've only got 1 minute to depress you now. And when we look at Latin America, it looks great because they've got far more women. But the truth is, when it gets to the high-level positions, the women are dropping off as usual. The other thing is when we had the IAU in Brazil, then we could ask a lot of the women there, because there's heaps of South American women there, and they're sort of like, what are you people getting right? You've got so many women in astronomy. Is it because if you're an academic, you're basically really rich and you've all got maids and slaves at home and stuff like that? Is it because, in general, South American countries are going to have this sort of community, family network and, you've got your grandma at home to look after the kids? And they said, oh, no, engineering is considered a prestigious field and being a doctor is a prestigious field. Being an astronomer is not prestigious. That's why women can do it. It's like, excellent, that's great news. And I probably better now go to my very last slide, which is, how can we sort of keep doing this in the future? And as the crazy person who keeps leading these demographic surveys, I'm going to beg everyone out here, taking from an excellent suggestion from Rachel this morning, that we really need to start collecting some data annually. Not from everyone, not a huge amount of data. Rachel had the brilliant idea that, of course, every institute does annual reports anyway, so they must be doing some calculations. If we can just collect some general data each year, it'll make it 1,000,000 times easier to follow, and we can kind of track how we're travelling on an annual basis. And I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Now, the Minister and her enthusiasm has put us behind schedule, which is great. If there is a technical question about the data, feel free to ask a question, but no commentaries at this point. Technical, I will cut you off at any technical.
You mentioned the challenge of comparing the statistics every 5 years or so because different questions have been asked. Can we just add the same questions from the previous years into the new surveys so we can compare like to like, even though we also change the questions and ask you?
It sounds so easy to do, doesn't it? But the thing is, I mean, I was on the last one 2 years ago, and I had a whole group of people who were looking at all of the questions we asked. It's amazing. I mean, it astonishes me. And the other thing I said is that when we make up a new list of questions right now, well, it's still fresh in my mind, but yes, we want to have the same bloody questions. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Okay.
And so if you're not actually nominating it, you're not going to win. And so that's data and something that,
So let's leave that for discussions of ways to change, to have some ways of forward in the future. Any last minute things before we move on? Carl.
It is incredibly hard to get personal data on people. I mean, I don't know that each institute that's collecting demographics on its own people is asking what is your nationality, what is your race. Their HR department will have that information, but if I go and ask ANU or I go and ask AAO to give me their stats on their people, they'll know their people. They should at least know if they're men or women. And besides that, I mean, they'll know individually what they are, but they don't necessarily have that data. So that is, you think it's an easy question, but it's not. It's hard to get that information. When we do the individual surveys, like we did this year for the first time, there we're asking people for their nationality. But we need that people to buy in and participate in those surveys. So we can start to do that on the individual level, but if you've got a way that I can get that data institutionally,
It's a diversity issue of another form.
I'm still not sure. I mean, what do you mean by diversity? Are we going to say that you should employ one person from each country in the world? So why is it?
There may well be biases within other areas that we haven't dealt with. So the question is, do they reflect what happens if we found out 30% of our people?
yes, please.
Yes. Last question, and then we really do move on. You had.
Yeah, but it has to be at least people that are doing STEM. So maybe we can go back down and say, what's the demographic of people that are doing STEM to start with, and then how do they move up the food chain?
Yes.
I know it's funny that I was wondering prices at the higher levels, prices with Asians, because sometimes
Sure, that's a great question. And most of the organisations, the ASA and the American, the AAS, yes, they are. There are specific ones for PhD students. There are specific ones for early career researchers. There are specific ones for lifelong achievement and those sorts of things. And of course, the lifelong achievement ones, those ones are dominated by men. But it's the problem that I can see already is that when we have the more junior ones, we're still not getting the same number of.
All right, thank you, Sarah. We need to move on, and I'd like to bring up next Warwick Couch from the Australian Astronomical Observatory. The AAO is sponsoring the next session of Inspirational Stories.
Well, thank you, Professor. So the AAO, of course, is delighted to sponsor this workshop, and indeed we've done so since their inception 4 years ago, and long may they continue into the future. Being an inspirational story itself, the AAO, of course, we reminded us this year with our 40th birthday, it's a great pleasure to sponsor this particular session on inspirational stories. And we have two of those, and the first is from Min Hun from ICRA. And without further ado, I'll ask you to give your talk.
Thank you, Warwick.